With Agent Under Fire ushering in the new generation of consoles, well, it was time for EA Games to try and improve on sales with a new game and make an even better Agent Under Fire. So what sort of direction do they go from here? Agent Under Fire was an original story taking place in the latter half of the Pierce Brosnan era, and 2002 meant the release of his fourth and final film as 007. There has been a movie tie-in game release for every film since A View to a Kill in 1985, so surely they would be working on cashing in on the 2002 release of Die Another Day. And, nope, that didn't happen at all. Supposedly, EA wanted to continue on with the original story's idea and try and implement elements from Die Another Day into their next release, but that didn't quite happen either. Which is weird, since the game they did come up with was released at the very same time as Die Another Day, mid to late November of 2002. So to have it have little to nothing to do with Die Another Day was an interesting choice, and I'm sure there was some hype for a game tie-in. So yeah, I'll only briefly mention the existence of Die Another Day for this retrospective since it has little to do with the video game series. But it is important to note that it was Brosnan's final outing, and it would be 4 years until the release of the next Bond film afterwards. Die Another Day was a pretty anticipated release at the time since it marked two major milestones, the 40th anniversary of Bond films as well as the 20th official release. It deals with Bond out to stop Gustav Graves, who wants to harness the power of the sun for an extremely powerful solar weapon called Icarus. Along with Brosnan, it stars Halle Berry, Toby Stephens, and Rosamund Pike. It tends to not be a fan favorite film, largely due to the unfortunate time it was released, the early 2000s, where films were pretty obsessed with computer graphics and green screen, which gave a lot of these movies a very cheap and lazy feel to them. It would be a while before graphics improved a bit, but practical effects were sort of a lost art at this time. The result is, stuff like this. Financially, Die Another Day was actually Brosnan's second most successful of the four behind GoldenEye, and falls right in the middle for the series at 12th, adjusted for inflation. While certainly a huge financial success, the reviews were pretty lackluster, resulting in the eventual reboot of the series in 2006. This was the swan song of not only Brosnan, but John Cleese as R and Samantha Bond as Moneypenny. Judi Dench as M would be the sole returning main cast member. But until then, we're going to hang out in 2002 for a bit. The sixth generation of video gaming was going strong, and EA was hoping for big results with this next one. Apparently, development started in late 2000 with Eurocom back at the helm, returning from the Nintendo 64 release of The World Is Not Enough. The PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox were all well established at this point, so a release for all three was planned at the exact same time, as well as an additional release for the PC about a week and a half later. That's right, we are back into the computer age, because those games were so great. But I joke, getting back in on the computer market in the early 2000s was a very smart move. The internet was everywhere at this point, so computers were in millions and millions of homes, whereas only people into video games owned consoles. Then they even released versions for the Game Boy Advance and Mac computers in 2003 and 2004. They basically had all their bases covered at this point. The result was a direct continuation from their original story in Agent Under Fire, and even has the return of CIA agent Zoe Nightshade. If you're only watching this episode directly after my Agent Under Fire one and have not played it and are confused as to why Zoe Nightshade is returning after she died in the second level in the last game, then, So, Nightfire was released on November 18th, 2002 in North America for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox, then for the PC 10 days later, then on March 18th, 2003 in North America for the Game Boy Advance, and then, yet again, on June 21st, 2004 for the Mac, but only in Europe. Eurocom developed the original three, but EA Games hired three different developers for the PC, Game Boy Advance, and Mac versions. Gearbox Software, JV Games, and Aspyr respectively. Man, all over the place. But unlike the multitude of differences with The World's Not Enough games, these all kept the same storyline and characters, but just tweaked levels and gameplay. We're mostly going to be checking out the GameCube version, but I will touch on the computer and GBA versions too. Development-wise, Nightfire has a huge pro over Agent Under Fire. They actually used Pierce Brosnan's physical likeness. Something always felt cheap about them trying to come close to Brosnan in that game, with the cover shrouding Bond in shadow to hide that fact. But here, they have nothing to hide. Weirdly enough, Brosnan did not provide his voice, as that was done by actor Maxwell Caulfield, who has been in a lot of stuff, including Grease 2 and a couple episodes of Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, starring Bond Girl alum Jane Seymour.
Wow, they feel really nice.
Also, look at this guy. He's like the hybrid of Pierce Brosnan and Roger Moore. Another notable voice actor is Ian Abercrombie as Alexander Mayhew, who played Mr. Pitt on Seinfeld, my favorite show of all time. It's like my worlds are colliding here. Anyway, my personal experience with this game is very similar to Agent Under Fire. I honestly don't even know if I rented it back when it came out or not, but I certainly didn't own it until going through the series back in 2010. I beat it only once back then, so I have little nostalgia with this one. But let's check out the back of the box. Do you have what it takes to be Bond? Short and sweet again, just like last time, and they're very proud that they got Pierce Brosnan to be in this, as they should be. I also love the back of the PC disc case. It's just an advertisement for the movies on DVD. The hell with the game, just go get the movies. Cool. Very cool. Okay, let's do this. Well, that's too bad. No title sequence and it just cuts to a still screen. Hey, kinda like the Nintendo 64 The World Is Not Enough. Made by the same developer, of course. I guess Eurocom isn't interested in the gun barrel sequence or the Bond theme or... Wait, what? Wait, what?
Use the helipad and take care of the body.
Okay, weird. It just cuts to the sequence after like a solid minute of staring at the title screen. And it's nicely made too. It's basically the same exact sequence used in Agent Under Fire with the obvious change in game footage, but why not play this from the get-go? Who knows? So, Nightfire begins with no actual level select. You're just automatically starting the tutorial level. It even says it's a tutorial level as it tells you which button to press and when. You find out later, but it's called Paris Prelude, and all you know is that you're in Paris on New Year's Eve in X year at 11:55 p.m. Bond is in some helicopter with a sniper trying to ward off enemies pursuing a woman in a red car. Putting you immediately in the action with no context can be a little jarring at first, but it's really just here to get you excited, and the plot doesn't matter at this point. Control-wise, there's really nothing to it. You press R when the game tells you to shoot a tire, blow up a car, etc. Graphically, the game looks great. There seems to be a definite improvement over Agent Under Fire, although it's nothing drastic. Things look a little more polished this time around, and the incline in graphical improvement continues on the upward trend. After a few tire blowouts, you stop a truck with an EMP device, and then Bond and Dominique ring in the new year with fireworks in Paris. So, what was that about? I don't know, but it was exciting, I guess. You are then treated to... what's this? Another title sequence replicating those in the films? That's pretty awesome, actually. It's an original song called Nearly Civilized, performed by Esthero. And hey, props to the game designers for doing this. I think it helps to enhance the quality of the game to make it feel even more Bond-like. 2 title sequences make up for the 0 in their version of The World Is Not Enough. So, there you go. Then you can finally operate the menu for mission select, multiplayer, and the usuals. This is a nice little touch too, where the control setups are all named after Bond films. Does it make sense to have a control layout called Octopussy? No, but whatever, it's cool. The second level is called The Exchange, and you are now in Austria to recover a missile guidance chip taking place in an exchange between Alexander Mayhew and Raphael Drake. This is the first real level to the game in the traditional first person. Bond sneaks into a castle, and this is where you hear some names like Drake and Mayhew and Nightfire, and see your old friend Zoe Nightshade. I feel like the controls for this game are a huge step up from Agent Under Fire, and they did away with those Pac-Man bullets. The game itself feels much smoother and higher quality too, but this makes sense given that the controls have been around longer. Eventually, you are given the task of getting the briefcase with the chip in it from a safe that you use a watch laser to open, and then have to escape with Zoe on the gondola. A helicopter attacks and you use a guided rocket to blow it up. It's a pretty fun and straightforward level. So that kicks off the story to Nightfire. It again goes in a direction by the developers, but it's clear that it borrows elements from other Bond stories. I think Nightfire is absolutely a recommendation. As far as the multiplayer goes, it's pretty customizable with bots, which helps the case for the PlayStation 2 version with its 2 controller ports. They actually bring quite a few older characters into the mix, like Renard from The World Is Not Enough, Scaramanga from The Man with the Golden Gun, and Goldfinger himself, among others, like, of course, Oddjob and Jaws. These are some cool levels too, like there's Fort Knox from Goldfinger. Really, it's a very decent multiplayer experience. It doesn't have the lasting legacy that GoldenEye has, but it's honestly an improvement over it in many ways. However, in 2020, it's doubtful that a lot of friends are meeting up for some Nightfire multiplayer. Back then, probably. But let's check out the other versions. Firstly, the PlayStation 2 and Xbox ones are essentially identical to the GameCube one. The Xbox one loads a little faster, and that's mostly it, aside from the different controllers. Second up, the Windows version. I don't really know how a game can be so similar and be by a different developer, but I'm just here to relay the information. I'm sure there's more to it. The Windows version was developed by Gearbox Software, a developer known for some real heavy hitters like the Half-Life series, Borderlands, and everybody's favorite, Duke Nukem Forever. Their version of Nightfire is very similar to the console ones though, except there are some omitted levels, like absolutely no vehicle stages. The game actually starts with the Esthero song and then goes into the exchange level. No Paris Prelude one, which in my opinion isn't a huge loss. They weirdly altered some weapons that appear in the game and stuck to the basics with the first-person only levels. This version is not typically favored by fans of the game, as it's more of a watered-down one compared to the consoles. If it was your only way of playing it back in the day, then it's passable. Multiplayer originally was online though, but being that the game is now 18 years old, yeah, there's really no reason to favor the PC version. Next up is the Game Boy Advance version. I was definitely the most curious about this one since I've never even seen images of gameplay. How are they going to implement this 6th generation first-person shooter to the Game Boy Advance? The GBA was easily a graphical improvement over the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, but it was nowhere near what a GameCube game looked like or anything. It was the middle ground handheld console between the Game Boy Color and the DS. This one was developed by JV Games, a very small company out of Nevada that made a handful of games, including a beer pong one for the PS3. Alright then. So this version of Nightfire actually keeps the first-person perspective. I was wondering if it would be like the Game Boy Color version of The World Is Not Enough, but no. They tried to follow the game as best as they could with the obvious graphical limitations. There's no voice acting, which is also to be expected. Like with the PC version, this game starts out omitting the Paris Prelude level and you start at the Austrian castle as it states. And well, they gave it the good college try of getting it as close as possible. It looks as pixelated as ever and even worse than Tomorrow Never Dies, but come on, it's Nightfire on the Game Boy Advance. A handheld Bond first-person shooter in 2003 was something that had not been done before. It's kinda like getting a frozen meal from the Dollar Tree. You know it's going to be nowhere near something delicious like Frontera, but hey, it's $1 and it's food. It's obviously the inferior version, but it's impressive for what they did come up with. The controls are pretty rough though, and there's no multiplayer. At this point, I say the Game Boy Advance version is recommended for curiosity's sake only. Lastly, we have the Mac version, released all the way into 2004. The next Bond game, Everything or Nothing, was already out in 2003, so we're slightly skipping ahead here. Enter the now 4th different developer for Nightfire with a company called Asper, who is known for some games like Civilization VI, Layers of Fear, and a couple Star Wars Jedi Knight games. To be completely honest, this Mac version is extremely similar to the PC one, and there really isn't too much to say. The vehicle stages are also omitted, but they improved on multiplayer by adding up to 32 people, which seems nuts. At this point in time though, that factor is pretty irrelevant. So overall, Nightfire is a pretty cool game. They improved on just about everything over Agent Under Fire and seem to be branching out on their own alternate universe Bond path. Critically, the game received mostly above average reviews. Some people swear by this one, even though I don't really have a personal connection to it like I do with GoldenEye. Surprisingly, Nightfire actually sold less than Agent Under Fire did on the PlayStation 2 specifically, and is not one of the best-selling GameCube or Xbox games or anything. It sort of falls under the, yeah, it's a pretty good game category without a great or legendary game status. So once again, thank you, and I hope you're still enjoying this retrospective. I'm getting into the territory now where getting proper game footage is starting to have its difficulties, but again, a big thank you goes out to James for providing it for me. I also decided to start my own Patreon page to try and eventually improve my technology in order to create better quality videos myself. I will never ever ask for donations for these videos, but hey, the option will be there if anybody does want to help out. I submitted my own hand-drawn design for a neat mug and tote bag option if anybody does choose to do so. I expect nothing though, and the state of my channel is not relying on donations to keep going. Feel free to like and subscribe if you have not done so, as these are something I will ask for. That does help keep my channel going. A big thank you goes out to those beautiful people who have done so. Next time we will be in the year 2003 and 2004 for Bond's next game release. EA Games continues on with yet another original story, except this time they are changing some things up and going even further into putting some money in and getting some known actors, some of which are pretty impressive that they pulled off. This is one that I specifically remember renting when it came out, so join me as we check out where they go from here. James Bond will return in Everything or Nothing.